Right.
So awesome. All right, guys, thank you so much for coming on. We were having some audio issues earlier with the Twitter, so we decided to jump over to the lovely Zoom. My name is Don, and I am on the Dr. Kimchi team. We are super excited to have our first ever interview with one of our potential practitioners that has joined the base. I met Sam when I was in Spain. He's an awesome guy with an open heart, lots of knowledge to share. And of course, we're super grateful to have both our researchers and doctors on the Dr. Kimchi team, Dr. Nagase and Mr. Matthew Halma. We are going to be asking and going deep dive into the work of Mr. Sam and learning about his practices, learning about his process, and it's an ability to go deep into anything that we would need to know before our community makes any decisions. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to come on here and have a chat. And with that, I'll let you guys take it away. So how about first we have the introduction with Matt, and then if Dr. Nagase's audio is good enough, I know there's a big typhoon going on over there in Japan. Then Dr. Nagase can introduce himself to our new viewers, and then Sam, you can take it away. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Yeah. Thank you, Don. Yeah, basically introduction. I have a academic background in biophysics. I'm a PhD candidate currently at the Free University of Amsterdam. And yeah, especially the last 2 years I've been working with people at the World Council for Health and the FLCCC. Basically, putting out scientific articles on the harms of mRNA vaccines and some of the evidence-based guidelines on how to treat vaccine injury, as well as other chronic conditions. So I had a longer introduction on the Twitter space, but this is sufficient. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Nagase for an introduction. So thank you.
Hello. Hi. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, so I'm Dr. Nagase. I'm an emergency doctor. I've been an emergency doctor since graduating. And emergency, especially if you've been working in emergency for a number of years, basically turns you into a specialist of other doctors' mistakes. So any other specialty that's screwed up, whether it's cancer doctors, orthopedic surgeons, or neurosurgeons, as an emergency doctor, to be competent, you have to be an expert in all the life-threatening problems that can happen in everyone else's specialties. So that's a big thing that I'm going to be making a part of this interview, is the safety aspect, right? Because even emergency doctors make mistakes, and we're just starting an organization right now, and we can't have a situation where somebody comes in with, let's say, headaches, and it turns out they have a bacterial meningitis and should have gone to the emergency department for IV antibiotics first before trying any energy modalities of healing. Because I'm sure you know we have immense forces against us, and whoever it is, globalists, local governments, national governments, they're always going to be looking for some way to shut us down. And I've had myself, since being in the freedom movement, what I'm pretty sure are fake patients. They come to me asking for medical advice. I don't know how they got my name and number, and they have a story that doesn't make any medical sense. And they're baiting me, asking me what I should do. And what I know for a fact happens with the Alberta College is they do have professional fake patients that will try and coerce or entrap doctors into doing something illegal, which in my case would be practicing without a license. So I want to make sure that all of us, that if we do have you on board, Matt, that every day that you see a patient, your problem-solving skills include the ability to sort out emergencies, something that should go straight to the emergency department, and the ability to problem solve and figure out whether or not the patient in front of you is a fugazi, is a fake, who might be trying to shut us down or gather evidence against us. So these are all things we need to be aware of, and so that's one of the goals here, is to make sure if we do have you on board, that you have all the skills necessary to spot emergencies and fake patients, because we want this project to go on forever if possible. And we want to make sure any lawyers and law enforcement and national governments who are legally allowed to do every dirty trick in the book, that they can't shut us down. That's what we want to make sure. So yeah, just turn it back to you, and you know, anything else you guys want to talk about before we get started?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Nagase, for bringing that up. Yeah, it's definitely important to keep in mind the current situation that we are in, and you know, we're working to change that, but you know, we are still we are still in this system, and so yeah, it's important to keep that in mind. So thank you. Yeah, I guess hopping over to Sam. Actually, first, thank you for that introduction, Dr. Nagase. It's an honor to meet you. This is actually our first time meeting, so that's great. I'm going to pass it over to Sam. If you could just give a brief overview of, you know, who you are, what you're doing, and how did you come into this work. So over to Sam.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction and inviting me on, and great to hear from all of you. So in terms of the work that I do, I am basically you could call me I'm a health practitioner, and I support people to activate their own self-healing potential. So I am not in any way suggesting that I'm curing or healing anyone or anything. And I really appreciate what Dr. Nagase said just now about safety. And one of the things that is absolutely essential for any prospective client is that they have already received a medical diagnosis, and they actually know what they've got going on, because as he said, a headache can be anything, pain, who knows what it might be. So it's really important that they go through that process before coming to work with anyone who's doing any work like that. So yeah, and with that in mind, so what I do is I look at what symptoms actually mean from the perspective of the body being intelligent and nature not making mistakes. So when you are looking at a symptom, for example, a growth in the body, or a rash such as eczema, or something going on in the joints, or whatever it is, rather than looking at something malfunctioning and going on in the body, we're looking to see why the body has carried out that adaptation, which has an ancient biological purpose. It may not be suitable to the life that we live now, but it's still sort of wired into our biology for the body to react in that way. And so we look at what that means, and then find ways, which can come from any direction. It could be things like lifestyle changes. It can involve changing beliefs. It can involve releasing emotional charge, but all about finding the root cause of why those specific symptoms have happened, and then helping the patient. Well, we wouldn't call it patient, call them a client, or just a human to move through the healing process that their body's going through, while keeping a high level of vitality, so that they can not only heal themselves, but also learn from what's been going on and hopefully improve their life in all sorts of other ways by becoming more aligned with who they are. So that's the gist of it.
Sounds good. So Sam, I have a question.
Yes.
Do you check people's blood pressures and heart rates and temperatures when you see them?
Well, I generally see people online.
Okay.
So, and it is about coaching, and they've normally been for all of
Okay.
those markers already, and they generally are coming. Most people are coming after a medical diagnosis. If people don't have a medical diagnosis, then I recommend that they get that first before coming to see me.
Okay. So you don't see any patients face to face then?
Not really, no, not generally.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
so that's I hate to say it, but that's a big safety. That's a very safety that shields us from a lot of liability. So that's good to hear.
Okay.
Because once we start doing face to face, examinations, I think the very basic of like blood pressure, heart rate, body temperature, um, has to be taken into consideration, because if somebody's coming in with, let's say with a headache, but they're obtunded, they don't have a full level of consciousness, and
Yes.
they have a high heart rate, then that puts us at a risk of, trying to treat subarachnoid hemorrhage or a meningitis without knowing it. So
Yeah,
that's really
I'm
good.
so glad that this was this was what you brought into this conversation about the safety, and because we can't be diagnosing or saying that we have medical knowledge that we don't have, or being seen at, well, I mean, you of course have medical knowledge. I have the knowledge that I have, but it works complementary to the medical knowledge, not instead of it. And that's really key.
Well, and also it's all tied together, right? Because
Yeah.
the root reason that someone might get a meningitis bacteria in their brain is because they have poor teeth. And they have poor teeth because they're always eating sweets. And they're always eating sweets because they have a mental depression, right? And they have persistent thoughts or people in their lives that cause a constant anxiety, which causes them to seek foods, which gives them bad teeth, and the bad teeth causes bacteria to, little by little seep into the circulation, and eventually it's just bad luck that one bacteria happens to be able to get into the blood-brain barrier, and then you have a meningitis. Right? But it all started with the people and the energies surrounding the client that was causing, a desire for an outlet, which is sometimes alcohol, sometimes it's food, unhealthy foods, and like you said, it's all related. So I'm glad to hear that we're on the same page with that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and in terms of what's actually might be happening if they get the meningitis or some big like healing, we would call it a healing crisis or a healing peak that's going on during their process. There's a big, almost like a big biological test going on for their body during their healing process, and we have to, if we're seeing anyone, of course, be very careful to make sure that we're not pushing them through a healing process too quickly, or dealing with their issues in a really quick way that causes their body and their energy system to almost boomerang back and create this strong reaction. So yeah, that's how I would see it, and being very careful with any symptoms that people have.
Well, from my perspective, we'd love to have you on board, Sam. Anyone else have any questions, comments?
Yeah, I was wondering, Sam, do you use do you refer to yourself as a health coach, or do you use that term? Do you think it's a useful term?
Well, I generally call myself a practitioner, and I don't really call myself a label at all. But if people ask, I would say that I'm, yeah, a guide or practitioner generally. I don't really like the coach term, but it seems to fit in the industry that we're in, and I haven't, yeah, necessarily found anything else to replace it. But I guess practitioner resonates with me more.
When people ask you what is German New Medicine, how do you approach their questions?
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, it comes back to, but essentially, this is the perspective that instead of the body going wrong in some way and some isolated mechanical fault in the body which needs to be targeted individually in some way, we're looking at the whole organism, and that the body isn't making a mistake, and that based on a conflict shock, so some form of shocking event or build up of small events, like a continual drip, drip, drip situation that might have happened to them over the past. Their body's carrying out a biological process to deal with the shock that they couldn't deal with themselves at that time, and therefore cells in the body, depending on which part of the body, go into overdrive to try and deal with the situation up until the point that there is some form of resolution, which can either be a good resolution or a kind of resigned partial resolution, which unfortunately is where people often get stuck in symptoms. And then the body goes into a healing process. And at this point, often in the healing process, is when what seem to be the big symptoms are actually happening. And this tends to be when people go get a medical diagnosis, and the healing process is often what gets treated instead of the initial build up to the healing process due to the stress and the shocking event that they experienced. So what we look at is, first of all, we look at what the symptoms are, whether they are in the healing stage or whether they are in what's called the stress or conflict active stage, and then use that to yeah, and then through analyzing that, use that to see how we can reduce the conflict or even resolve the conflict, all while maintaining a good sense of vitality for them so that they're strong enough to go through this healing process, yeah, in whatever way works for them. Now, the best is lifestyle changes, which might immediately bring to light things like change of diet, etc. But it may not be that. It could be change of circumstances, might be their job, something in their job that is causing them to be sick. It might be something in their relationships, could be where they live, various different emotional responses that they have, like you were saying earlier, around anxiety, yeah, fears of different conflicts going on in their lives. So we identify whatever it is and help them either to make peace with that so that they can move through it, or to find a different solution, which might involve working with beliefs, emotional blocks, going to other experts if need be, for things like dietary recommendations, homeopathy, even like, yeah, even medicine as well. So what's called conventional medicine, there's a place for all of that, of course. And as you know, in emergencies, it's number one for most people to actually go and have that treatment. And yeah, often clients are coming to me after they've had emergency treatment and having some resolution from that. So I might have rambled a bit there. Did that answer your question? Was there anything else that
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that was good.
Right.
What's generally your follow-up schedule after trying interventions with patients?
Well, so yeah, I'm really working with them as they desire, and it depends what they've got going on, how much they're suffering, and if you know, if they're in an intense amount of pain, or it's having a massive effect on their life, then we might work together quite regularly, even a couple of times a week, or possibly even more than that. Some people, yeah, it might be more suitable for them to that we work every 2 weeks, so they've got time to implement changes in their lives, carry out various processes during that time. And then, yeah, and if after we've finished working together, whatever that might be for them, then yeah, I would just check in with them at some point afterwards, always following up. And then, yeah, you can't always say that they always get back to me, of course, but that's the nature of the clients and, yeah, how they are. One thing that is quite interesting is that people sometimes with this sort of work, people get great results, and then it's almost like they forget that they had the issue in the first place because of it. So you don't tend to get.
That's not the first time I've heard this from alternative health practitioners.
Yeah, it's amazing, really.
It's kind of it's off topic, but there's one practitioner of the Rife machine in Calgary, and because of the trouble he got into with regulatory authorities in the province of Alberta, he's not able to charge anything for his services. So everything he does with the Rife machine and the treatments is for free by donation.
Yeah.
And he's treated a number of nurses. And he said, yeah, the ones who forget that I fixed their chronic pain or their thoracic syndrome, the most consistently, the one group that's the worst about acknowledging and showing appreciation for the treatment is nurses.
Yeah, there's a cognitive dissonance there, of course, because yeah, that's a massive belief system shift to go for that. And it's great that there are actually a lot of people in the medical system that are open to these kind of interventions and opportunities as well. And yeah, sometimes we hear things like, I was thinking of one client, and they went, and they often hear things from their carers, their doctors, such as, well, I don't know what you're doing, but it's working, carry on, that sort of thing. Or you must never have had it in the first place has been I've heard that a number of times.
Yeah, there's a lot of denial in the medical community, that's for sure. So I've got to go in a few minutes here. Do you have any questions for me?
Do I have any questions for you? Yeah, well, have you explored German new medicine and this kind of work before? And what's been
No, I'm aware of German new medicine, but no, I haven't. I don't know very much about it other than it exists and it takes a different approach. But again, I've seen regular standard medicine make so many mistakes my entire career. It's default for me. If something doesn't work and it's been proven not to work over and over again, which is my own observations in my own career, then it's time to take a different approach, right? And the ultimate test is whether or not the patient gets better. So if a different approach, whether it's energetics through Rife machines or German new medicine or some of the very unusual stuff Russian advanced practitioners get into, if it works, that's the proof right there that the patient is getting better. And as long as the patient's getting better, I mean, that's the ultimate goal. It's not to adhere to any one particular school of thought. The school of thought is getting the patient better. Whatever achieves that goal, no matter what the label, that's something that we should be using. Otherwise, we're not really doctors.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, we're looking at giving people choice effectively, and the beauty of so we're talking about German new medicine, but the actual umbrella of the system I work within is meta consciousness, which includes German new medicine, but we also do look at things like polyvagal theory and how that fits into it as well. And then the different modalities and how they can, such as emotional freedom techniques, timeline therapy, etc., that can help people to address why events are and shocking events have affected them in the way that they have. And yeah, but everything fits under the umbrella. All treatments can fit within what is essentially the detective work once someone has got a diagnosis to find why the root cause has come through, and then yeah, give them those opportunities to heal in whatever way works for them. And yeah, I'm a big fan of the whatever works approach.
Sounds great. I've got to sign off right now, but it was a pleasure talking to you. And yeah, I'd be happy to have you on board. Thanks.
Yeah, likewise. Great to meet you. Thanks for
All right.
your attention.
Nice to meet you, Dr. Nagase. Yeah, I actually have one question. Is can you explain briefly, you outline in your application some of the bodies of work that you use, and this includes the work of Halma, also the emotional freedom technique tapping, and polyvagal theory.
Yeah.
I'm sure a few of our audience is familiar with EFT to some degree, and possibly also the polyvagal theory. Can you explain briefly the work of Halma and how that modality works?
Yes. So Dr. Halma was the discoverer of the laws of German new medicine. So discover is a funny word, but there we are. He discovered that this was working initially in himself. He was an oncology doctor, working in conventionally in the medical system, with cancer patients. And then he had a situation where very tragically his son was shot and killed in an accident, and he developed shortly following this testicular cancer. And so he was very curious about why that had happened, and then but he just had a hunch that it was to do with the death of his son. And so he then started questioning his patients and seeing what types of traumatic events they had experienced, if any, in the lead up to their symptoms. And he found that they all had various types of shocks, different types of shocks relating to the different tissues in their body that were affected, which had led to which he then had this perspective that maybe they had led to the symptoms. So he started looking more and more into that and did many, many empirical studies, thousands over the years, where he found that no matter what the symptoms were of whatever was being considered a disease in somebody, that you could track back based on the different organs and tissue layers and find where it might be where the time of acceptance, which had then led to healing symptoms, happened, or it might lead back all the way to the initial biological conflict shock, where they hadn't been able to deal with the situation at the time, and it had then led, like, this is not a conscious thought by the individual, of course, but their body had taken over in some way, and tried to resolve the shock through a biological process. And it got to the point, yeah, he effectively mapped the whole thing out. And yeah, really, it really saw it as these laws of nature, and how the body always responded in this way of going through this conflict active phase and then into the healing phase. So yeah, that's the gist of German New Medicine. The different tissue layers, the different organs, and this is a great crossover into the medical world, because medical doctors, when they see this, can really understand it, that all the different tissue layers are laid down at different times during the embryonic development, in the first 25 to 30 days in the womb. The different cell layers happen in the embryo, and they relate to different tissues in the body. And so you can use effectively the different types of tissues to track back and understand the kinds of conflicts that are going on. So just a couple of examples of that. If you've got absolute core survival stuff around perceived starvation, some of the reproductive, some respiratory, the core survival situations that a most basic organism such as a worm might have, then that goes to that affects the most basic part of the brain, and a tissue layer which was laid down accordingly at that embryonic time. So it might be parts of the digestive system, so things like Crohn's disease might be related to these sort of core survival things. Isolation and abandonment is a massive one, where, and it's so common now. We see people who've got these isolation symptoms, and they feel very, very chronically lonely in their life, or they felt abandoned, and they laid down that whole belief system. And they get this water retention symptom, basically, which can affect just about any other symptom that people have, because it makes inflammation worse in the body. It stops anything else healing effectively if they've got other things going on, if they've also got this core survival water retention thing. Now, it doesn't make sense in our world today, because we've got most of us have got taps, so we can have running water. We've got access to food. But if you think back to times when, yeah, perhaps people were living in a more basic way, or even animals earlier than humans being isolated, abandoned by your community, would be potentially fatal. And so the body's doing everything it can to hold on to water and fluid during that time. So there are core survival issues relating to very deep, primitive parts of the brain and the tissues connected to that. Then at the other end, you have the cerebral cortex, which is the last part of the brain to be laid down during embryonic development. And it tends to be then the interface with the world and social interaction. So anything that's happening in your skin or your outer tissue layers, wherever in your body, would relate to this. So then you've got things like eczema, which or similar skin conditions such as psoriasis, and they broadly relate to separation conflicts. So the separations happen, and then when there's some form of resolution to that, actually the rash is breaking out as a healing process for the skin. Then you also, so there's those two very different layers. And then you have things like territorial conflicts can also be affecting the these sort of outer tissue layers in the body. Different organs, like even in the digestive system, although there's the deep survival based things which would be affecting the sort of deeper layers. If it's just on the surface superficial layer of the gut, then it's more likely to be a territorial conflict, for example. And then you've got, there's different layers between as well. Just the cerebral medulla is laid down before the cerebral cortex. Anything to do with your musculoskeletal system, all about how you affect the world, your strength, your ability to do things in the world, basically will affect these tissues, which tend to be like muscle, skeleton, but it also things like the blood vessels, the lymph system as well. And this is all related to anything to do with self-devaluation, self-worth, self-esteem, the classic almost universal limiting belief of I'm not good enough affects people here. So people have this sort of looping effect of chronic back pain or something like that going on. And of course, symptoms like this can even they can become self-fulfilling, because if you're someone who's always been strong and fit, and then suddenly you've got chronic back pain, and your belief system is, oh, I'm getting old, I'm not as good as I used to be, here's the evidence for that, then that can cause like a looping effect where the symptom becomes its own trigger. Same with eczema, the eczema, which is around a territorial conflict, or sorry, a separation conflict. When it's trying to heal, you look at yourself, red, puffy, you're like, oh, I look ugly, I don't want to be out among people. So it can become its own self-fulfilling separation conflict as well. I've said a lot there. Does that make sense? Have you got any questions on that?
Yeah, that makes, I'm not familiar with German New Medicine, but that explanation makes sense when you talk about the different tissues and their stage in embryology. I think that's it's very fascinating. Yeah.
Cool.
I just wanted to, Dawn, were you about to say something? I think I might have cut you off before.
No, you're okay, Matt. Thank you so much, Sam. Very interesting information. And of course, for those that are listening for the future, thank you, Dr. Nagase, for coming on. I think just managing the charity wallets and everything, and all of our listeners, all the community and the Dr. Kimchi community, we're going to be curious about how we would be sending our money to the practitioners that we eventually decide to vote on. So, Sam, if you were to be funded, what ways in which you would need to use the funding for your clinic, just to let the community know about how you would plan to use the funding that you had requested.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for that. So my intention with the funding is that, when it's appropriate to actually use it, would be to create a much improved new website, essentially, from what I've got currently, with a lot more information on it that people can use to really understand themselves and what might be going on here. That it's going to actually be educational and support people in ultimately having choice in how they approach their health and well-being. So I can envision a big part of it going towards a really great website, which is going to have two functions. It obviously multiple functions to give people information, to invite people that feel aligned with it to work with me, but also I train practitioners in several modalities. So to be able to have a ripple effect of inviting people in to actually become trained in working in this way, and then use that. So it's spreading that whole ripple effect of more people raising consciousness and bringing more choice to people in their healing process. So that is a major part. And
so like a scholarship in a way, like you'd be offering scholarships to different kinds of people through your clinic?
Well, it's more the scholarship part. I mean, I in any case, when I offer trainings, when I work with people, not everyone can afford the standard rates that which people want to, which obviously as a practitioner need to earn money from what we do for our livelihood, etc. But I do offer scholarships anyway. I normally make it available at a lower cost to some people. And that's what any additional funds beyond what's needed for creating the new website, my intention with that is that it will go towards funding treatment, or treatment's not the word, but funding this work to support people that ordinarily wouldn't be able to afford that, whether I do that in a group basis or whether on an individual basis, depends on what's needed for them. So those are the areas that I'm looking for funding with at the moment. Any questions on that?
Awesome. Yeah, and I guess the other question for me is, if I was to be onboarded as a patient for you or as a customer for you, I'm not sure the language you like to use, but
Yeah.
let's just say a customer.
Yeah. I can't use
what's the-
patient for the reasons that Dr.
Yeah.
Nagase outlined already.
I understand. So I'll just say a customer.
Yeah.
If I was to be a customer with you, what's the general process that you take people through? What's the prognosis, I guess? I don't know the words, for lack of better words, prognosis, that you would take people through. Yeah, what would that look like if I just came on
Yeah,
and
okay.
was just becoming new to your work?
Sure. Okay, great. So the first thing that I do is I offer a free call to anybody, which is about 30 to 40 minutes generally, where we just talk about them, what they perceive their problems to be, what they're looking for help with, and then talk about what I can offer them. And then from that point, they do have to, if we are looking at something medical going on, they need to have a diagnosis for that. Now, sometimes the diagnosis isn't even clear, and but once they've been through, they need to at least have been through medical analysis or a medical system to find out what's going on for them if it's physical issues. And then from that point, I get them to send me quite a lot of detail about what's going on for them, and I use that to carry out an initial bit of detective work for what I believe is happening. Then we have a series of sessions. Often I start with 4 90-minute sessions with people. I'm not saying that, of course, there's no guarantees that everything's happening in 4 sessions, but that's a beginning point. But some people can't handle 90-minute sessions if they've got a lot of fatigue or whatever. So we look at what they've got going on and we will work according to what they need. And that could even be 20 or 30-minute sessions with someone initially. Now, we're not diving straight in to their symptoms often. We're often going to be looking at their fears about what's happening in their life, their beliefs about what their symptoms mean, the conditioning that they've received around what this is, and helping them to unpick that. So an example of that is the diagnosis is often an enormous shock. So if you go, you've been feeling okay, but then you're not feeling so okay, you go to doctors and then you get a cancer diagnosis. That's very shocking, and that itself can have a biological effect on the body. So we're often going to be starting to unpick those areas rather than just diving straight into the symptoms, which, as I said earlier, can be too much of a boomerang effect. And actually, people are always looking for an enormous shift in life, but what the reality is, small increments is really a much more valuable way to go, because otherwise you can have this effect that it's too much for your system and you end up in it can almost create more shocks for the system if you work too quickly with this stuff. So yeah, it's a very careful approach, making sure that we're not doing anything that's dangerous. And yeah, so a number of sessions. I give them very simple things to do, which might be lifestyle changes or might be doing some energy techniques such as EFT tapping, which we'll discuss all of that with them. Might also, look into some deeper stuff around their life and their purpose and perspective. Depends what they need to heal. So it's very tailored to individuals effectively. And and then we continue until they feel like they've had satisfying results in whatever way that they need. Have I answered everything?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for your in-depth answer. I think it was a very good answer, and will probably most likely answer all the questions that everybody in our community would have for you.
Cool.
Yeah, at the moment, I can't think of any other questions, unless Matthew, you have anything you'd like to say?
No. Thank you, Sam. I'm very satisfied. You provided a great explanation of your modality, your individual practice as well. I guess just one more question. What differentiates you from other practitioners?
That is a great question. And so the thing that really I have found that differentiates me, and this is what clients say, is the approach that I have. Because of course we can go and say, oh yeah, we've got this basket of modalities, but what people are actually looking for is a solution to a problem, whatever it is. And when people work with me, I have a very good attention to detail where I can really see what's going on for them and pinpoint the things that they say to take them down the track, which is going to get us as quickly and effectively to their root cause, or whatever the tracks and triggers that relate to that root cause will be. I'm also surprisingly, even though we're working with very serious situations here, most people find working with me a lot of fun. So there's a lot of humor in the sessions, even while dealing with very serious situations. And that I always say that if someone's crying and laughing when we're in a session, that is a really good sign that there's a breakthrough, because they can see from a different perspective and have a huge shift. So I'm very provocative in that way. I use humor in a very provocative way to people say that I'm saying the things that they're thinking, but they wouldn't dare say out loud. And yeah, so it can be that process is very and often enjoyable, but even though we are dealing with very sensitive things, and of course I'm sensitive around that too, I'm not going to be pushing people, and it's not a case that they feel laughed at or anything like that. We're very collaborative in their healing journey. The other thing that I think is really important is, and I've been told this by the people that I teach in particular, is that I've got a really good capacity for putting complex concepts across in an easily understood way. So those are things that really define how I work and why people may choose to work with me.
Thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Dawn, because I think we're wrapping up.
Great.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. I know I enjoyed listening and learning about you and your work, Sam. I know we met in person, but now we are going deeper into your work, which is really exciting.
Great.
I know personally from being with you, you are definitely very jovial and have a great sense of humor. And I think for me, it felt more like we were sort of discovering and exploring together.
Yeah.
And I think you have like an element of that sort of fun to you, which I haven't necessarily had with other practitioners that I've worked with. That was just my personal experience getting to know you personally. I thought I would just say that little thing. Yeah, so I guess that would wrap things up. So yeah, thank you so much, Sam, for coming on. Thank you so much, Matt, for coming on. I know it's very early for you where you are. So I sincerely appreciate you coming on and asking the pertinent questions that the people want to know.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate being invited to be here. And yeah, anything else you want to know, just get in touch. And yeah, really appreciate this. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, Sam. So one last question, I guess, is good for people that are not on your mailing list or people that are in our Telegram or our Twitter group. What's the best way that they can get in contact with you? I know you have a website now that you're revamping, but if they really resonated with your message, how could they reach out to you personally?
Yeah, so they can contact me on my website. On the front page, there is a free video guide on how to use EFT tapping for self-help. So they can sign up for that, then they'll be on my mailing list. And the web address is eftnow.co.uk, which won't be the address of the future website I create. But that's the website I've got currently. Still lots of great stuff on there, some really good blogs and case studies, etc. And a lot of people, I think 600 or 700 people have signed up for that free course and got a lot of good feedback from that. But if people want to contact me directly, they can just send me an email at sam@eftnow.co.uk. And like I said, I can offer a free consultation for people.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sam. That's all for me.
Okay, that's great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.